Zhuhai Expo has been insane this year. We had the J-20 dual-seaters, we had hypersonics, we had drone ships, we had the so-called 6th generation aircraft, which is basically a joke. We had anti-ballistic weapons, anti-stealth radars, new drones that nobody knew about, and something that few talk about, plenty of new guided weapons. However, for me it is clear where we need to start. From the J-35A. And the reason is not because of the aircraft itself, which is interesting, don't get me wrong, but it is because the air power game in the Western Pacific and potentially in other parts of the world has just changed. The J-35 started as a loser. It was the loser of the competition that brought to the adoption of the J-20, the famous Chinese air superiority fighter. The first pictures of the new aircraft started emerging in 2011, 2012, with the aircraft being officially presented as a project at the time in November 2012 at Zhuhai. Shenyang, after losing the competition with Chengdu, decided to keep developing the aircraft with an eye to export. It was designated FC-31 and 2 prototypes were built. Then the new aircraft attracted the attention of the Chinese Navy, which did not have a really modern aircraft for its new and shiny carriers. In fact, the size of the aircraft and the dual-engine configuration were a good match for naval use. Then at some point in the second half of the 2010s, it seems that the development of the aircraft split in 2 or 3 parallel development streams. There is the naval J-35, whose first flight was announced in 2021. Videos and pictures of the aircraft have emerged on the Chinese internet since then. Aircraft mock-ups have appeared on Chinese carriers, and there is the possibility that the first landing and takeoff from a carrier happened this year on the Liaoning. Then, in October 2024, quite unexpectedly, the PLAF announced that the J-35A, the land-based variant, had just been accepted in service. And this is the aircraft that we saw at Zhuhai. For completeness, there is also the J-31 BGR Falcon that was presented to the press in July 2024, not as a prototype, but as a concept. This seems to be a rather different aircraft from the J-35, larger and with side weapon bays. This seems to be an export variant that is in development, but the name is strange. In fact, in the Chinese system, the J plus number designation is attributed only to government programs. So there is really no clarity around this variant. The presentation of the J-35A has made waves in the world press. The vague similarity of the aircraft with the F-35 sparked really wild titles in the general news outlets. This is the reason why, to make sense of this situation, you need a tool like Ground News, which is sponsoring this video. Ground News is a website and an app that gathers related articles from more than 50,000 sources around the world in one place, so you can compare how different outlets cover the same subject. Every story comes with a clear breakdown of the political bias, credibility, ownership, and then headlines of the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. One feature that I keep an eye on is the daily briefing. Here we can find a coverage of the Zhuhai Air Show, and it's saying China unveils advanced stealth fighter at Zhuhai Air Show amid military expansion. And as usual, we have the political bias. And when you use Ground News to go and look at the specific entries, you understand how the same news are covered with a very different spin. In fact, consider this one, an Indian source. China's largest air show takes off with fighter jets and attack drones. But look what the Voice of America is saying. Suspected of plagiarizing the US F-35 stealth fighter, China's J-35A made its debut at Zhuhai Air Show. If you don't use a tool like Ground News, you miss all these nuances. Ground News is very important for my research since I try to be as factual and unbiased as I can about something that often is neither black nor white. Ground News is giving my viewers 50% off their Unlimited Access Vantage plan. This is their best deal of the year and it will only be available for a limited time. If you're already a subscriber, you can send Ground News as a gift for 50% off too. So make sure you use my link. I think Ground News is doing an important work and I hope you'll check them out. Please support the people who support me. Okay, from now on we discuss the J35 and the J35A that was seen in Zhuhai, since the J31 is just a project as far as we know. The two aircraft have only minor differences from their appearance. Wang Yongqing, I hope, a senior AVIC designer, has confirmed in an interview that they work with the one platform but multiple types approach. This means that they try to preserve the commonality wherever it is possible. And this may have interesting implications. A naval aircraft have several design differences that can cause the empty weight to increase a few percentage points, let's say up to 5%, if compared with a same design land-based aircraft. The first and more obvious is the resistance to corrosion in a marine environment. Paint, junctions and materials may need to be different and often thicker and bulkier and heavier. This is pretty clear, but it's not the main difference. The main difference is with the aerodynamic and the weight. To land on a carrier, a low approach speed while still being capable of maneuvering is desirable for obvious reasons. To take off from a carrier, a low stall speed, again, is desirable because in this way you save on catapult size or, if you're using a ski jump, on deck length. Must have either more complex high-lift devices, like flaps and slats, or just larger wings. I'm not getting into the details here, it would be more suited for a scientific video. Let me know in the comments below if you're interested, and maybe we can do that. However, the obvious consequence of having high-lift devices or larger wings is that there will be more weight on the aircraft. However, this is not enough. In fact, takeoff and landing cause high loads on the aircraft structure. Takeoff requires a strengthened undercarriage attached to strengthened bulkheads. The nose structure is required to bear the load of the catapult launch. The tail structure is required to bear the load of the tail hook while arresting. So structurally, a naval aircraft can be heavier than a land-based one, but in a project, changing structural parts right in the middle of the aircraft, it is not the most convenient of the activities if you want to preserve commonality. Those structural parts are among the first things that you assemble, so if you want to have different structures for different aircraft, well, you may as well have two separate assembly lines or just have two different aircraft, to be honest. And please consider, it's not just the structure. Changing the structure means that you may need to reroute cables, you may need to rearrange internal parts, and so on. So if the Chinese are really serious on this respect, it is possible that the J-35A carries around the same structure of the naval J-35, which in exchange for some weight penalty would make the aircraft a particularly robust one for land-based operations. In general, a naval aircraft adapts well to land-based operation. The opposite is hardly true. So the J-35 has a pretty conventional configuration that is shared by many stealth projects that we have seen in the last few years. First of all is twin engine, as you can see. And the aircraft has a pretty distinct fuselage. Here on the front you can see the classic chine of stealth aircraft, which keeps going here, and it probably doubles as a vortex generator for non-linear lift. Twin tail, canted outwards for stealth reasons, and a very tapered wing, which is, well, almost a forced choice when you're talking stealth. The horizontal tail surfaces are completely mobile, like many other aircraft of the same class. And I find it interesting that it's actually showing the tip of the wing vortices like the F-35's does, which probably contributes to the passing resemblance to. This picture is from the side that we can have an idea of the corner between the wing and the fuselage, which is definitely not 90 degrees, as stealth prescribes. In this picture you can also see that the engine is serrated, again for stealth reasons. The moving part of the vertical surface is relatively small, which talks about a reasonably good lateral stability. Like many other stealth aircraft, the tail surfaces go beyond the engine to partially mask the infrared plume from the side of the aircraft. Again, this is a pretty common solution. In this picture we can appreciate the platform alignment, another typical feature of stealth aircraft. You see the leading edge of the wing is aligned with the leading edge of the tail surfaces, and the trailing edges are aligned as well. From this view you can appreciate the DSI intakes, which some believe that have been invented by General Dynamics with the F-16. Nothing is farther from the truth. The DSI intake have been invented by an Italian called Antonio Ferri in the 50s, so they are a pretty old solution. There's a video on the channel that describes how DSI intakes work, and if you're interested, yeah, just have a look. From this picture we can't really appreciate the base, the internal base of the aircraft. They should be more or less in this position. It is just one contiguous bomb bay, like on the J-20, which means that the structural stiffness, particularly torsionally, of the aircraft need to be managed with some care, but that's nothing that can be fixed with just conventional designs. From this picture we can appreciate the general cleanliness of the lines. The aircraft looks very smooth, which means that it's either a stealth cladding, which is thick enough to cover all the panels in the surface, or it is an aircraft that is a plastic plane, so it's mostly made of composites. The tail seems made of composites, and that would be a pretty conventional solution. We can appreciate some details. For example, this intake is probably there for oil radiators or cooling the electronics or anything, because using the DSI intakes you don't have the separation between the intake and the fuselage where usually these radiators are placed, so you need to have a scoop somewhere else. Here on the chin we can appreciate the presence of what seems to be an EOTS-like optical system, very similar to what the J-20 has. The sources don't say whether it is the same or not, it could well be. You can see the serration on the radome. It's not very clear, but it is still visible, typical of stealth, and the serration on the undercarriage panels, again typical stealth features. The aircraft is not really area ruled, but there is this very curious curve here, which I don't know exactly what it is for. The only explanation that I can find is a sort of area ruling near the tail. It would be interesting to see the aerodynamic results, the aerodynamic tests of this aircraft, and understand why they have chosen this solution. There are some other details that are barely visible. For example, here there is an optical window, and it is believed to host a system which is like the F-35 DAS. Seems reasonable. There is another one here. And you can see here there is a slightly prominent radome, which is probably a satellite communication system. But overall it's a pretty clean aircraft. The resemblance with the F-35 is just superficial. The two aircraft have the same general configuration, but they're definitely not the same. Weapons-wise, the aircraft is reported to have a maximum payload of about 8,000 kilos. The weapon base can host up to 6 PL-15s, and a variant with folding fins have been shown at Zhuhai together with the aircraft. The bays don't seem to be very deep, but the Chinese have small diameter precision-guided munitions that could fit inside for air-to-ground missions, executed in full stealth mode. In a non-stealthy configuration, the aircraft features 6 underwing hardpoints. There is no reason to think that it won't be integrated with the full Chinese panoply, which we hardly see, but it is quite large. Again, this is a subject for an entire separate video. Let me know how interested you are in the comments below. A key point where we know almost nothing is the avionics. Wang Yongqing, in his interview, mentioned all the right features. Sensor fusion, but well, this is a given nowadays, it is no longer advanced technology. Passive and cooperative targeting, collaborative engagement, and secure data links. Please note that introducing these features may have a large impact on the tactics and the training of PLAF pilots. While the elite force that flies with the J-20 may already have had experience of these subjects, the large mass of Chinese pilots may need to be part of a small tactical revolution. So as usual, it's not just getting the technology, which is not simple, but it is achievable. It's putting the technology to good use that takes time, effort, and a great will to learn and apply new things. The one detail that seems consolidated, though, is the use of the KLJ-78 AESA radar, which is considered a very capable unit. It can drive 3 arrays, with the usual nose-mounted one, and 2 side arrays, but these seem not to be installed on the aircraft. Propulsion is another point where there is some confusion, mostly because the development of Chinese jet engines is a complex subject in itself. The first prototypes were powered by Russian engines, but then they were equipped with Chinese derivatives. The current engine is the WS-21 with a thrust of 93 kilonewtons, but it seems that the final production engine will be the WS-19 with a thrust expected to be 116 kilonewtons. As a comparison, the F-35 has 191 kilonewton of installed thrust, while the final total thrust for the J-35 will be 232 kilonewton. This is a very, very rough comparison, but it shows that the Chinese are going for an aircraft with decent kinematic performance. The aircraft specifications are not known. I put together some numbers as reported by various sources, but these are either speculation or just vague references reported from a sign at the air show or from marketing material. The aircraft should have a max speed of Mach 1.8, a max combat radius of 1,200 kilometers in stealth configuration, and the maximum takeoff weight should be between 28,000 and 31,000 kilos. The max payload should be around 8,000 kilos with an internal bay payload of about 2,000 kilos. As a comparison, the aircraft is slightly longer than an F-35, but the internal volume is likely smaller. I mean, they don't call the F-35 Fat Amy for no reason. In fact, the F-35 maximum takeoff weight is a couple of tons heavier. However, take all these numbers with a massive handful of salt. So far the aircraft, but the key question is, why do these aircraft even exist? Its existence for the Navy is easy to explain. The J-15 is not a modern platform. The J-15T that has been just presented at the same Zhuhai Air Show will recover some ground, but it is not a 5th generation equivalent. The J-35 naval variant is ideally positioned to pick up this role. So from this point of view, it's easy. It is more complex to understand why the Chinese Air Force needs the J-35A. And to be honest, there is no documentation detailing the thought process that led to this decision, so we can only speculate. Like everything in China, the PLAF is growing rapidly, but you may be surprised to learn that it is still in numeric inferiority if compared with the United States Air Force, and it's even more so if we add the US Navy and the US allies in the area. The PLAF deploys about 3,000 combat aircraft, but the number of modern platforms is about 1,100. If you combine all the F-35s and the F-22s currently existing and operational in the world, it's more than 1,100. Of these 1,100 Chinese modern aircraft, about 200 to 250 are 5th generation J-20s. Everything else are either J-10s or flanker variants. Some of these aircraft are very advanced, but these are not 5th generation. And since the Chinese always pursue both asymmetric and symmetric replies to the Western doctrine, then it would make sense to introduce a fifth-generation aircraft to fill the numeric gap. We know that the Chinese have taken steps in recent years to improve the pilot and ground crew production pipeline to grow their forces numerically and qualitatively. I believe that the J-35A is a step in the same direction. Current estimates set the Chinese production at about 150 combat aircraft a year. If I'm correct, we will soon see the production increase well above 200. There have been reports in the last few years of AVIC building new assembly lines, and we need to keep an eye on this growth. I think it is not far-fetched to imagine a PLAF in 2035 of still 3,000 combat aircraft, but all 4++ and 5th generation. If I had to make a prediction, I would see an air force of about 500 J-20s, 1,000 J-35s, and about 1,500 J-10s and J-16s combined. So despite what many believe, I really think that the F-35 is a great aircraft which is surrounded by a terrible program which is designed to turn all the non-US operators into extensions of the US Air Force. This means that the aircraft is not suitable for, well, basically any country that is outside the inner circle of US allies. This leaves a demand for fifth-generation aircraft that can be met by US or even European productions. This is the market that the Russians wanted to tap into with the Su-75, but now it seems that the Chinese got there first. For example, Pakistan has announced in January 2024 the interest of acquiring the aircraft, and news emerged that some Pakistani pilots are already in training in China, which is very strange since I don't think that the serial production has started yet. It is probably starting now as we speak, and I don't think that a training syllabus has been established yet. The Pakistani are quite a close Chinese ally, so this kind of purchase had to be expected. But there are several air forces in the world that could benefit from a fifth-generation platform that comes with relatively few strings attached. For example, think of the Egyptians, who have consistently been denied most or modern Western weapons. Think of the Persian Gulf Arabs that today want to diversify their sources away from the US and the West. Think of the whole of Africa that is progressively moving closer and closer to Russia and China. So I think that there will be a lot of demand for the J-35A in the future, and I bet that the production rate will not be a problem, since producing a lot of stuff cheaply and quickly and high quality is what the Chinese do best. So thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you very much for having given me your attention. And if you really like this video, you can do like all the others who are supporting this channel on Patreon by being a member or by any other of the means available. And by the way, there is also a GoFundMe available today, which is connected with a book that I'm trying to write. It's a long-term project, but if you're interested, there will be a link in the description and a QR code on screen. And if you can't support the channel financially, which is perfectly fine, no problem at all, then please subscribe, because 50% of you who watch regularly this channel are not subscribed, and I don't know why, or interact in any way. Leave a comment, like, hit the bell so you won't miss anything. So this is it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.